And we are live a few minutes late because we had some technical difficulties. We have no idea on whose side it was, but it's now magically working. So that's the power of technology. I'm Kate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary and also the host of Goaldigger, my weekly show here on LinkedIn Live, talking about finding your voice. And we have an incredible guest today who I get to call friend, but also someone who not only has found his voice, is continuing helping to find voices of others. And it's my pleasure to introduce Scott McGregor, who is the founder and CEO of Something New, but also the Talent Champions Council, which I'm also incredibly proud to be a member of. So welcome, Scott.
Kate, thank you so much. I'm glad we worked out our technical difficulties. I had no idea what we did, but it worked. And that's all that counts. So happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And I haven't been able to say this, I think, since we started Goaldigger. You're one of the only guests that I've actually been able to see in person. You hosted an amazing event at Luminary before the crazy rise of Omicron, and we can talk a little bit about that. Yep. But it's great to see you again, even though we are on another screen. So welcome.
It was such a treat to do our book launch at Luminary. Your space is phenomenal. Your staff is incredible, and it was an absolute delight to have it there.
Well, it was great having you and Mike and Nick from Blankets of Hope. Big shout out because it was in honor, or all of the proceeds from that book launch actually went to Blankets of Hope. Yeah. We'll talk about that. But I should have mentioned in my introduction, not only the founder and CEO of Something New and the Talent Champions Council, also 4 books now?
4 books. It'll be 5 in November.
Unbelievable. So let's back up, right? So I never do bios. I think it's really important as we find our voices. Can you kind of walk us back and then walk us forward around what brought you here? You are one of the most remarkable connectors I've ever met in my life. And you just do it every day. And I thought I was a good connector, but man, you take it to a whole different level. So can you walk us back and walk us forward?
In terms of relationship building, or Scott McGregor 101?
You around what you've been doing, sort of what led you to create Something New, and obviously writing all of these books, and then the Talent Champions Council, which is another sort of tentacle to everything that you're doing in the world.
So, my business, Something New, really, like many entrepreneurial journeys, was just me reacting to issues that I was having and trying to, solve problems that I was having. So at 29, I was fortunate enough to get tapped on the shoulder. I left a Fortune 500 company to become a chief revenue officer for a company with 5 people. So I had to build sales, marketing, and client success from scratch. And we were very fortunate that we grew the company from 5 people to about 300. So during that course of hyper growth, I was working with a lot of headhunters or recruiters, people in the talent space, because we were growing so fast. And honestly, my experiences were really poor. And I just thought, this is such a dysfunctional industry. And it's so important because people are everything. I mean, every business succeeds or fails based on the people that they bring into their organization. And I just thought there needed to be a better mousetrap built. So 7 years ago, I jumped off the cliff with a nice nudge for my wife, who said, you're pretty passionate about this. Why don't you just do it? And we built a different mousetrap in my company, Something New. And then about a year ago, I needed to get out of Dodge. So my wife and I decided, where could we go that we've never been before, but heard a lot about, and we'll take a road trip, just kind of like a COVID, let's get out of here. So we went to Charleston, South Carolina, which is phenomenal, but we went in August, late August. So it was like 95 degrees with 100% humidity. It was insane. So during our drive back, it was like a 14-hour drive back to Connecticut, I was talking about how much I love Something New because it gives me my the two things that really kind of stoke my fire are the ability to give back and the ability to help people. So Something New definitely does that and does it in a big way. But we're only able to work with, maybe about 100 companies a year, and we're pretty tapped out at that point. So I was trying to figure out how could we do it bigger and better. And it dawned on me, again, not rocket science, that the companies that we work with and try to help them to understand their people strategy and do it better those companies are made up of individuals that need that help. So I decided to start a private membership community to help develop what we call people over everything leaders, and really get people to focus on the fact that their number one asset always has been and always will be people. So that's really how the Talent Champions Council was born. We are very excited to have you doing a Conversations with Legends series coming up. That's going to be a lot of fun. And that's what we try to do is for a very, very nominal price, teach people how to become better people over everything leaders and understand that it's not HR's job. If you're leading one person or if you're the CEO of a company, you better get your people strategy right, because it's really what's going to make you sink or swim.
So we're going to dig into a bunch of those. And I have to give, I always get a little, Kara Golden, right, is the one who introduced us. Shout out to Kara.
Yes, love Kara.
She's amazing. Also a great connector. Love everything that she's done and doing. And she's become a great friend and a peer mentor. Leader, people over everything, right? That, especially over the last 2 years.
Yep.
I am sure you're you're tapped out within Something New with the number of clients that you work with. But as we've seen the great resignation, the great reexamination, reset, whatever you want to call it, this is becoming probably one of the most important factors in how people are now making their jobs decision, right? Not just comp. And I talk about this every single week and are navigating the work compass around what people are looking for. They're actually asking about culture. They're looking into the leaders. Yep. How have you seen over the last 2 years in particular, this really change on both sides, both from the employer side as they think about strategy, but then also just people within these organizations?
I think companies for decades really have kind of sleptwalk through their people strategy, and they maybe talk a good game or they've got something catchy on their website, but they really weren't living it. And I always say, it's not what you say, it's what you do. That's your priority. So you can splash like really lovely things on your website, but if you're not doing anything, it doesn't matter. I think the climate that we're in today is forcing companies to really sit down and evaluate, hey, what are we doing? And I think candidates, there's one thing, and you mentioned it just a second ago, there's one common denominator that we hear 100% of the time from candidates. And it's not, to your point, it's not compensation, it's culture. People are 100% of the people that we deal with on the candidate side of the equation are looking for a good culture. Yeah. And companies, in order to build a great culture, we really believe there's 3 different buckets: talent acquisition, onboarding, and retention. If you nail those 3 things, you will have the byproduct of that is a great culture. Right. You literally cannot do those 3 things well and not have a good culture. So you don't have to really focus on, like, a lot of companies, I'll give you an example. They say, well, we need a good culture, so we're going to buy a bunch of ping pong tables, foosball tables, and a kegerator, and that's going to be a great culture. I call that cultural Febreze. That's like, you're just wafting this scent in the air, but really your employees are like, this place sucks, despite the fact that kind of it looks cool on paper. That's not a great culture. So companies are just, I think, becoming a lot more intentional about how they look at their people strategy. which is a great thing. The end result will be better cultures, happier workers, more productive workers, and greater revenues and profits for companies.
I love that you brought that up about the cultural Febreze. I had not heard that before. That's a great way to think about it from an
I've got to
analogy
trademark
standpoint,
it,
right?
right?
You got to trademark
No,
that.
I do.
What we've seen, I mean, in the companies that Luminary works with, that I work with in particular, also is that one, you have to shift your hiring practices, right?
Yep.
And also the whole people process in general, and evaluate, what's working, what's not. And whether people like the company or not. Even what Google has now come out and said is, you know what, we used to do the ping pong thing. We used to do, the rock climbing wall. We used to do free lunches. That's changing, right? Because that was once something that attracted people, but that's not what kept people there, having a ping pong table. And so now that's shifted to parental leave policy and paid sick leave policy and vacation policy, and really thinking about policy and behavior that can help shape your culture. As you think about even all of the incredible people that are within the Talent Champions Council, right? These are thought leaders, these are business leaders, these are founders. How do we drive real change at the macro level versus, one of us is doing it, one of us is doing it, but really make a significant change? So the next thing that we're, hitting the environment, whether it's COVID or something else, we're not backpedaling and saying, oh, damn, we had this chance and we didn't take it.
I think it starts with mindset. Like if you don't have a people over everything mindset, everything else that you're going to try to do is not going to work, or it's not going to work to the degree that you want it to work. So, I think it's really evaluating, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, like, do I really live what I'm saying? So I'll give you a couple like super quick examples of things that I really encourage CEOs and C-suite people and leaders and managers to do. Audit your calendar. Literally take a look at your calendar, take a look at all your meetings, and then drop them into buckets. And how many of those meetings are about your people strategy? At the end of the day, you'll find out it's pretty small.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's none. And that's kind of crazy, because when I talk to CEOs, I typically ask them 3 questions. What's your biggest expense? Guess what they say? Labor. Labor is people. What's the number one thing you need to do to get from point A to point B? Because everybody wants to get somewhere, whether that's a next round of funding, they want to go public, they want to IPO, they want to hit a milestone event. Typically, CEOs will tell me it has something to do with people. And then the third question is, how often do you and your executive leadership team sit down and talk about your people strategy? And it's like, oh, we don't do that. So that's a big, big disconnect. So I think if people audit that, I think the other thing is, how do you view, in terms of mindset, how do you view employees? Most people will say, oh, people are like, if you hear this talk in your company, you probably have a mindset issue. People are messy. People are a pain in the ass. If you're talking like that, you probably don't have a people over everything mindset. So you really need to be careful about that. And then I think, companies in general, I don't really think have thought through what are they. Many times companies act like they're doing an employee a favor by employing them. But think about it through this lens. Why do you hire any employee? You hire an employee because they're going to give you a positive ROI.
Right.
In other words, you're going to hire them and pay them $100,000, not to get $100,000 in return, but to get $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in return. That's how business works.
Yeah.
But I think companies have conveniently forgotten that really they're getting more from their employees than they're giving them. They're giving them $100,000 to get $300,000. So when you start to think differently, that mindset of your organization starts to change.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think very early on in my career, I learned the difference between a really good manager and a really bad manager, and you can learn from both of them, right? And what I learned from my bad manager was what not to do, right?
Yeah,
And how to think of my people and hire the best people that not only make me look good, but that will ultimately take my job someday,
right.
right? That's why you hire good people and you invest in them. A lot of things, Scott, that we talk about here on Goaldigger and certainly on at Luminary and other places is around investing in people managers, training managers,
Yep,
because the path to promotion in most organizations is I get to become a manager. And yet then they don't know how to become a good people manager.
right,
There's nothing sort of set in stone around what you're talking about people over everything, culture. How do we get better at investing in managers to make sure that they are trained appropriately, that they know how to do tough conversations, that they know it's not just about people are messy. The people that are messy are actually helping you deliver the
right.
best results for the company.
I mean, the short answer is everyone needs to join the Talent Champions Council, obviously.
Of
Um,
course.
but it's, I think, first, are you even picking the right people?
Right.
To be a leader, I think a lot of people always say, well, I want a job opportunity where there's room for growth. And that typically means that they want to get into leadership, but it's really trying to figure out, why do you want to get into leadership?
Exactly.
Many times people want to get into leadership because they want to get away from, you know, having
Doing.
a sales quota, let's say. And
Right.
they think that by becoming a sales manager, that they won't have the same pressure, when in reality, you're going to have a lot more pressure. You probably make less than your star salesperson. You're less in control of your own destiny. So I think oftentimes companies just wind up promoting somebody into a leadership role, but they're not really cut out to be a leader.
Yeah.
So really figuring out, like, what is a servant leader and what does that mean? And does this person really belong in a leadership capacity? So you've got a lot of people that are in those roles that probably should never be leaders. We've all worked for
Right.
somebody that we're like, holy mackerel, like, how did this person ever become a leader of other people?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the investment, you've got to make an investment in your leaders, whether that's joining a community like the Talent Champions Council, or whether that's giving them other unique learning and development opportunities. You've got to do that. And a lot of companies kind of drop the ball when it comes to pouring into and investing in their leaders.
Yeah, in the wrong way. I would totally agree. I think when you look at the pipeline in most organizations, and this is one of the reasons I started Luminary, right, was that the top get that investment, right? They
Yep.
get the executive coaches, they get the exposure and the visibility, and they should. They're the senior leaders. They've risen. They've accelerated. But what about the rest? And so, as we think about investing in individuals, investing in teams, this is where organizations like Talent Champions Council's Luminary can say, listen, let us help you. We're not trying to replace what you're doing internally. We're trying to help those individuals, not only so they stay, they become better leaders,
Right.
they become more loyal. And by the way, in the process, you're actually not only retaining through that person, you're attracting new talent that wants to stay because they see a path, right?
Right.
Not just a path to promotion, but a path and a culture. One of the questions that they came in as we're talking is if a person is interviewing with several companies, how do they determine which company has the best culture? Any tip you want to share, Scott?
You know, back channeling is certainly a good way to do it. Find people that used to work there and talk to them about their experience. Obviously, there's the tools out there like Glassdoor, although I don't put a ton of stock in Glassdoor because that tends to attract a more negative vibe. So people typically that have had a bad experience are much more prone to put something on Glassdoor. you've got to ask those tough questions. You've got to almost turn behavioral interviewing on its head and use that in the interview process to figure out, what have they done in certain situations when it comes to things that are important to you, whether that's, work from home or whether that's maternity leave or whatever the case may be. How do they, everyone tells me, like when I talk to companies, I would say almost 100% say they have a great culture, which
Right.
is absurd. So I always ask them, give me some examples. Like I can't just say to a candidate, XYZ company has a great culture. Like let's tell some stories. And oftentimes I find leaders really struggle to come up with those stories that would really demonstrate that they have a good culture, or they talk about, in my mind, kind of silly peripheral things like, we cater lunch every Thursday.
Right.
Like, okay, that's nice. And I'm not against any of the, any of the frills that companies offer their employees, but those things in and of themselves don't make a good culture. So you've just got to ask tough questions.
Yeah. And the other thing is we all are connected, right? In different ways. LinkedIn is a great tool, right? So if you're interviewing in a company, I can guarantee there is someone in your network that has worked there or works there presently, right?
Yeah.
Reach out to them and ask them questions. Hey, what's it like? What was it like? Versus just relying on anonymous Glassdoor. I think and if you don't know someone or they're not in your network, I bet there's another connection that you can ask. Hey, by the way, do you know anything? I'm interviewing there. I'd love to learn more about their culture. One of the positive things that I'm seeing, and we had earlier this week in our Navigating the Work Compass show that we host on Wednesdays, was around what candidates are now asking, whether it's through the recruiting process, through the search firms, is about culture. Yes, comp. Yes, what are your policies? Yes, what's my PTO look like? But ultimately, what's the culture like? And you can't just take their word for it. So do that back channeling and do some research. I know we've got, and if you don't know Mita Malik, she's our next guest. I don't know why I haven't made that connection before. You guys
I definitely need to get to know her. Absolutely.
EFFs. And she should be part of the Talent Champions Council. So I will follow up on that. As you think about people over everything, and there have been such great comments in the chat around this guy is smart, people over everything. You think this is common sense, right? If you're a leader out there, a manager, you're aspiring to be one, any last tip that you can leave around that or you're just trying to help change an organization from within around people? Any last tip or advice around you feel like you're pushing a rock uphill? What should you do?
Yeah, I talked to a group of people yesterday about this, and I think sometimes people get overwhelmed. We had a couple people in the group that work for very, very large companies, and they're like, boy, I can't kind of impact this organization as a whole. And I think it just goes back to control the controllables. So control the group that you can control and create, I call it a culture bubble, create a culture bubble that people are going to look at and go, wow, like what's Kate doing? Like people are happy because I've seen companies with a very toxic culture, but there are managers that are killing it because they've created a culture bubble around their people. And hopefully, like other things, that becomes a ring and a ripple where people go, oh, wait a second, I need to pay attention to what Kate's doing because she's seeing a lot of success. She doesn't have the turnover issues. She's able to hire the people she wants to hire. She's getting phenomenal results. Let me ask her kind of what are you doing? And hopefully that has a compounding effect.
I love that. We're going to have to bring you back to the Luminary screen, whether that's in person or virtual, because I think just from the companies that we work with and all of the community at Luminary, they've got to learn, they've got to hear more from you. So in the absence of that, and we'll work on that offline, where can people find you, something new, information about the Talent Champions Council?
Best bet is LinkedIn. So that's my social media platform of preference. Yes, you can go on Instagram if you want to see where I go on vacation or something like that. But yeah, LinkedIn is the place to go. Connect with me. I love building relationships. That's kind of that's what I love. I love just building friendships. So like my friendship with you is priceless. And it's just, I love doing it. So I would encourage anybody, reach out, say hi on LinkedIn, and I'd love to get to know you.
And I will second that about Scott. The moment we connected, it was platonic love at first sight, and you're just such a huge advocate. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, just a connector. And I would, as someone who's now part of the community for Talent Champions Council and working with you and just learning from you, LinkedIn is the best place for people. Go follow Scott. And I just want to give you one other shout out also to Claude Silver, who is part of the Talent Champions Council, also who connected Mita Malik and I, our next guest. But here's the thing about Scott. Scott really gets to know you. I don't even know how if we ever even talked about this, but I am a huge Maryland Terp. It's where I went for my undergrad. Scott consistently brings up in some way, shape, or form that Maryland connection. He has sent me so much merchandise for Maryland that I'm like fully outfitted. And that is just, again, it doesn't have to be something like that, but just that personal connection. It's not just about business. It's really getting to know someone. So just thank you for the friendship and the partnership. And I can't wait to do more with you.
Thank you, Kate. Love you to death. Have a phenomenal weekend, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
And now we have our second guest. This is so fun. February Goaldiggers have every week meetup. We have back-to-back guests. So it's great to have you. Now, I will say, for those of you that are still watching, and we've had such great comments for the last session, Mita has been on this before. Mita, full disclosure, is really one of my most amazing and cherished friends. We've built that over the last couple of years since I was first introduced. Again, shout out again, Claude Silver. But Mita, just watching you over the past couple of years, the 3 years really that we've known each other, you are extraordinary human, connector, leader, thought leader, manager, producer, everything. And there's so much going on in what you're doing. At her day job, everyone, is the head of equity, impact, and inclusion at Carta. She's also one of the inaugural part of the inaugural accelerator program at LinkedIn. So shout out to and call out to make sure you're following her. But also a working mother of two, also a voice for women in the workforce. Like the list goes on and on and on. And just so excited to welcome you back.
Oh, thank you, friend. I'm excited to be here. It's a nice way to end the week.
And that's the other thing about Mita. Like every time, whether it's a text, a phone chat, an email, the friend comes out, right? It's like, thank you, friend. I've learned that from you, by the way, because it's a nice way to greet someone. It's a nice way to feel special. Yeah. So welcome back. I know we had you recently as a guest with my co-host, Susan Chapman Hughes, for Navigating the Work Compass, but would love to hear more on Goaldigger around over the past 2 years. And I would say really kind of accelerated. You've really found your voice. Yeah. I mean, it's like.
It's unleashed.
It's unleashed. Yes, I love that word. So Goaldigger is about finding your voice. So can you kind of tell us what you've been doing and really how you are using this, again, extraordinary voice in what you're doing, yes, at your company, but more importantly, how you're using it in the world. And I'm going to use a couple of specific examples later, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll start with my story, which some of you have heard. I know Kate has heard. I was the funny-looking, dark-skinned girl with a long, funny-looking braid whose parents spoke funny English until it wasn't funny anymore. I grew up outside of Boston. I was bullied a lot, both verbally and physically, by my peers. And I think that's just been a driving force. Like, I never want anyone to feel that way. And for a long time, I had lost my voice because I let bullies take over my voice. And Kate, as you and I have talked about, who knew that those bullies in the schoolyard would be waiting for me? And so many of us in corporate America, right? And so I think that I have been through a pretty horrible, toxic work situation, which I know you and so many of the women at Luminary had helped me through. And so I think having gone through that and just starting to talk about it more and more, when I had shared with other women in particular what I had been through in like a quiet moment, they were like, I've been through that as well. And you're like, wow. And not enough people are talking about it. And I think what we've seen, especially in this marketplace, as we talk about not the great resignation, but the great awakening, people are just not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to work somewhere where I don't feel valued, seen, and heard. I just won't. And there are choices, right? Yes. There are a lot of choices out there. And so I think that's the tipping point. I think it's probably lots of pent up emotion, anger, hurt, sadness that people have been dealing with in their workspaces and their workplaces. And they're like, enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Yeah. I mean, that was even with Scott, right before, around people, right? People are no longer going to sit idly by and just take it. Yeah. They're going to call out. They're going to use different platforms to do that. We've seen that, sort of these groundswells in companies around even return to the office policies and what that's going to look like, parental leave, paid sick leave. So no longer, I think, are people going to sit by. And again, you have to have a voice too within that company, yes. But you also have to feel like you can use it without repercussion, right? Or retaliation. And I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think for women of color, those mm-hmm. underrepresented communities, there is always this fear of, can I use my voice? I'm afraid to use it.
I think that's a great question and a great point you bring up. Everyone has to set their own boundaries, and you have to do what's right for you in terms of your own mental, physical, emotional well-being. For me, I'm at this point in my career, I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Mm. If I can help someone else out by sharing my story, and if they feel a community in that and they're inspired to do something different in their life, I'm going to do it. That didn't happen overnight, right? I was scared for many years to speak up and say, what are people going to think, right? Or am I going to be judged? And now I just don't have that fear, but I think it's just through growth and experience that you come through that. I also have a day job. I work at Carta, and I love my day job and I love my team. And so also, like, the things that I'm speaking up about are things that I think universally everyone would respect, right? And so I think also thinking about, for me, it's like when I share things, it's from a positive place. I try to be positive, but I try to say, here are things that happened to me in my past, and here are ways in which I wish allies had showed up for me. Here are ways in which I wish bosses had showed up for me. And you know what? I am so thankful to all of the bad bosses I've had.
I just said that on the prior scene.
So much from them, right? And listen, guess what? I've been a bad boss. We all have. Like, that's really hard to look in the mirror and say, hey, people are leaving companies. Oh, but they're leaving bosses. And oh, they're leaving you. And they're leaving me. Because I haven't always shown up in the way I needed to for people. And that's a journey of growth. And so just thinking about that, like, how am I showing up for my team and other people, is something I'm constantly thinking about. We don't always get it right.
No. And I think that's the important thing, right? You no matter how great of a boss you think you are, manager, there are still going to be situations where you're not going to handle it right. And that's okay. I mean, I've been there. I've managed thousands and thousands of people. And now, obviously, as a startup or a small business, it's a whole different ballgame. But you learn from those, and you have to be open to learning. And I think that's where, when we think about those historical managers in our careers that we watch time and time again not learn, you sort of, and we've had this conversation, go, how are they still here?
Yeah. And the question you have to ask yourself, for leaders listening, is how many people, if I am the toxic boss, I'm the toxic boss, how many people are you going to sacrifice and let walk out the door for me to keep me, right? And I think that's the reckoning that's happening right now.
Yeah. Again, people over everything, right? To Scott's point, and this idea that it's only about money, right? It's no longer only about money. That's one part of when you take a job, you stay in a job, you look for a new job. There's so many other things. And it's interesting, the Great Awakening, one of Luminary's newer partners, Viacom CBS, their new theme for their women's group and more broadly is for 2022 is reflect, reset, restart. And I love that, because you've got that sort of, let's reflect on what's happened. Let's do a complete reset, right? Like, new day. Yes. And then restart what matters for us. So you, every day you're sharing on LinkedIn, which is for you and I, and even Scott before, our preferred sort of getting our voice out there. You share on LinkedIn around not just managers and leaders, about brands and doing the right thing. And are you doing the right thing? You have built a career now around the sort of, thought leadership and diversity, equity, inclusion. But before that, at Unilever and other brands, you were leading brands. So
Yes.
you were on the other side of the table.
Right. Yes.
How much of what you're doing now was sort of informed by what you saw in those years around the missteps? And because now you can completely see when a company or a brand does the wrong thing.
Yeah. I think how the market's changed, Kate, it's a great point, especially for people who are in the chief diversity officer role, or anybody who's thinking of building end-to-end inclusion ecosystems. Workforce is so important. We know that everyone's focused on diversity representation workforce, but all of a sudden now you can't separate how the brand shows up in the marketplace and your products and services. Those two things aren't separate anymore. Right. And supplier diversity, which I know you're really passionate about in the work that Luminary is doing. Who are you writing checks to and why? Is it the same 5 agencies of record? And then values, right? You can say you're going to stand for values. It's very easy to post something on Instagram, right? And say Black Lives Matter and all the things that we'll see during Black History Month this month. Okay, so what are you actually doing?
Yeah.
And I think social media, a lot of things have changed where people just have access to those things. They can see it. One of the things that I have coined and talk about is diversity dressing, which we'll see this month a lot of. We see it all the time, but as you know, we joke, I'm not a foodie. My husband is. I'm about community and conversation. Kate knows this. I'm not a foodie. I'll go wherever she takes me to eat, but I'm a beauty person. I'm still a beauty person. I love beauty. And so I'll be on Instagram, unnamed beauty brand. I'm like scrolling, a beautiful image of a Black dark-skinned woman appears with makeup. You're like, oh, this is cool. And I see that. And I say, oh, if this is going to work on her skin tone, it'll work on my skin tone. So I want to look up the eyeshadow. And then I go to look it up and they actually don't make products for her skin tone. And you're like, that's diversity dressing, right? So you can pretend, right, that you are speaking authentically to the Black community. It's very easy to put up that post, but then actually you have no products and services serving that Black community, serving the Black community, excuse me. So that's what you'll start seeing happen more and more. So that's why it's so important that everything, what I call the inclusion, the end-to-end ecosystem, everything is connected.
Yeah, the diversity dressing, right? You should trademark that because I think that's so. It's funny. It was like maybe your ears were ringing. I was on a call this morning with a very senior executive in a very large global company, and he said, "Have you noticed this year all of the posts about Lunar New Year?"
Yeah.
Or the Asian community. When, okay, that's one day. What else are they doing? And then as we head into Black History Month, and Luminary sent this out on Wednesday, it is the coldest, longest month of the year, right? And so you better get your posts in about Black History Month, right? That's the wrong way to look at Heritage Months. That is 1 month, but it has to be part of your DNA every single day from inside. And then also how you're reflecting from a customer standpoint.
It's not a check the box exercise. It's not a one-time tokenistic act. And people, consumers especially, will call you to the carpet. And also don't forget, your consumers are your employees, right? I think there's that like I say your employees are the forgotten consumer, right? We're so busy thinking about what's happening externally, who we're selling how much to and why. It's like, actually your employees can be your biggest advocates if you bring them along the journey of what you're doing.
Completely. As you think about brands, and again, if you follow Mita on LinkedIn and you write for Entrepreneur, you write for Fast Company, you write for Sway. I mean, you have incredible reach and audience. For a leader or a manager that has had a misstep, and doesn't know the way back, right? Because I think we hear that all the time. Like, well, I don't know. Now I don't know what to do. Yeah. Any advice to just to get that person out of that mentality around, I don't know what to do. I've ruined it.
Well, listen, I think our relationships with brands are just like our relationships with people, right? If I did something to hurt you, I have to show you that I will repair the relationship. So it starts with an apology. It's not the apology that my husband gives me, which is sometimes, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's a non-apology.
That's a
That's
non.
a non-apology. So brands, when you make a misstep, the first thing is show up and apologize and then educate, right? I'm sorry I missed the mark. We're sorry we did this. It's like, no, tell us what happened.
Yeah.
Were you
I didn't mean to offend you.
Yes. Were you stereotyping a Black family, an Asian family? What did you do that someone can actually learn from the mistake? Oh, like this is the mistake I made. And then it's just like in any relationship. If I hurt you and offended you and upset you, I can apologize and give a detailed apology. But then what I do next matters the most. So you might say, okay, so she apologized, right? But like, what is she actually going to do about it? So those acts and those intentions mean a lot. You know, Sephora, yes, I'm going to use a beauty example. Sephora is I love Sephora. And, you know, back in, I want to say, I don't know the exact date, 2018, 2019, they were accused of a racist incident in their stores. And you look at in 2022, what Sephora has done, the work they're doing every single day, I'm astounded. It's really impressive. From their accelerator program, where they are putting their money behind getting more Black and brown owned businesses on their shelves and in e-commerce, to their supplier diversity commitments, to they commissioned one of the biggest studies in retail that's ever been done in our time on racial bias. And based on that, they actually scaled back third-party security in their store, their training, their beauty associates on inclusion. And also, like, if I was to show up, which has happened to me often, like, oh, your skin is too dark, we don't have shades for your skin. Like, how many times have I been to a counter when that's happened, right? So I look at that and I think, wow, like that small misstep, which honestly most people forget, right? Because so much has happened since then. But look at all the amazing progress they've made.
No, I think you're right. A shout out to Georgia Sell, who runs DE&I, who and I have, again, full disclosure, LVMH Sephora is a new partner, a corporate partner of Luminary. So we're excited to work with their women and those from underrepresented communities. But to your point, it's not just about corporate. They're bringing that into all of their stores.
Absolutely.
Not all of those stores it's not just the managers at the stores, it's the part-time employees. It's actually investing in those employees that really had never been done before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean, end to end, it has to touch all those touch points. But so there's so many examples like that in the marketplace. So I just think like brands are relationships that we have, right? It's just like any relationship. So think about how you would repair a friendship or a relationship. It's never too late.
It's never too late to start. And also, you've made a misstep, apologize for it. Now, what's the way forward, right?
Absolutely.
As we think about employees, right, that are, whether they're stuck in a culture that they're not happy, if they've got that not so great manager, because, by the way, you're not going to say he's not a great leader, because they shouldn't be called leaders if they're not great, right? That's my view.
I love it.
But if they've got that and they're sitting in that situation, maybe they can't leave, right, because of financial instability. They're the breadwinner, they're a single parent household. Any advice to kind of overcome or think about how to get out of that situation that, you know, both of us have been in, by the way?
Yeah, I think number one, have a strong community. And I know I'll say this again, but Luminary was there for me during that time, and Kate and so many amazing women I met. So find a community that you can rely on and count on that can help you think through some of your options. I think number two, find something else that sparks joy in your life. Maybe that's a side hustle. For me, that became writing. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't bake, I don't ski, I don't have any other hobbies. I have kids, but I love to write. Like, that's my superpower. And if I could do that all day, I would. So what is it else that you could be pouring some of that pain that you're feeling into, and focus on that? And number three, Kate and I are both big fans of LinkedIn. Get on LinkedIn. It's your digital resume. If you feel stuck in your current role, how can you be showing thought leadership on the digital platform? By either resharing content, posting your thoughts on things happening in the world, starting a LinkedIn newsletter. There's so many different things. And you don't, like, I know it can be scary. You don't have to be posting 5 times a week and do a newsletter and you could just start very slowly to start showing your thought leadership. And that, I will tell you, also has been a game changer in terms of like when I felt stuck and I couldn't get out. And now it's like, wow, I have people coming to me,
Yeah.
asking me for advice and guidance or job opportunities or things like that. Where in the past, like years ago, it was just like a flip of like, oh my God, I like submitted my resume into the Pandora's box. Never heard back again. If I'm lucky, I get like an automated response, right? And so
Yep.
flip it to say like, I'm going to drive my career in this search. And so let me show people my thought leadership.
Yeah, who I am, right? Because you're right, it is, and it's your digital resume, it's your story,
Yes.
right? And it provides a very unique opportunity to develop broader exposure and visibility and to reach a completely new audience, that you might in your various communities and sort of your sphere at that present time. It really can explode and break down barriers of who you reach. I mean, I've seen it for myself at Luminary, because prior in my banking career, there were lots of restrictions around how I could show up, right? Because I'm representing the organization. Now it's my own company. I can really
You
kind of
can
say
show up
whatever.
however you want. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the other thing is, from what you're doing now with this the inaugural accelerators program at LinkedIn, you're actually saying, I'm kind of putting a stake in the ground around the topics that are important to me. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about sort of that content that you're sharing regularly about, and why it's so important to you? Not just because you had bad bosses, but because
Right.
and bad experiences from a very young age.
Well, I post about a lot of things and a lot of different topics, but for the LinkedIn Accelerator program, I applied because I think you and I have had many conversations, the devastating impact the pandemic has had on women at work. And from a US perspective, because I know we have a global audience here, but from a US perspective, we are down to women's workforce participation levels that we haven't seen since the 1980s. And I don't know why everyone isn't just jumping and screaming, probably because I'm exhausted. I can't scream anymore. But over 4 decades of progress gone. And so the question is, we have to be asking ourselves is, for many of us who have had the privilege to work from home, we're hitting 2 years in March, right? I had someone say to me, your background hasn't changed. I'm like, I've been in my bedroom. This is my background. I've been sitting here for 2 years working. And
Right.
so for 2 years, if I have left the workforce and now I'm not trying to apply for a job, I now have the pandemic gap year of 2 years. Right? So what sort of bias are women going to face? How are recruiters and leaders going to think about how we can bring in amazing talent? We keep talking about like the availability of talent, and talent's not there. I wonder, like, yeah, how many caregivers didn't have a choice and sat out,
Right.
put their families first, and now they're ready to go back into the workforce? Talent right there. And so what I'm posting about is really for women who are job seekers, my advice, what I've been through, and what words of wisdom I can offer, but also sort of calling leaders and recruiters to say, hey, this is what you need to be doing. It's all of our responsibilities. Imagine if each and every one of us helped one woman get back into the workforce, just one. Like that is a ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect. Yeah. And this is going to impact the workforce for many, many, many years to come. And we know the stats are there. When a woman leaves the workforce, this is before the pandemic, but when a woman leaves the workforce for more than a year, not only do they face the stigma of the gap in resume when they try to come back, they also, their salary is devalued 40% less than when they left, right? How do you come back from that? There is a comment, and I want to recognize that in the chat, back to this repercussions around utilizing your voice. Voicing values and morals versus needing to pay rent is a scary tightrope to walk. As a woman of color, the repercussions of that decision can gravely impact you. Bouncing back isn't easy. And thank you for sharing that, because you're absolutely right. It also depends on where you're sitting in your career.
Yeah, that's exactly. You have to make the decision for yourself. Like, listen, if you are sitting at an employer who no longer matches your values and how you want to lead your life, I wouldn't recommend that you start indicting them in social, right? So there are things, right? But you also, back to your point of like, when you are working for an employer, like if you are in the crypto space, you could become a LinkedIn influencer around crypto, right? So like think about like, if you are showing up in a positive way teaching lessons, sharing your expertise, you also become an ambassador of your company.
Yeah.
Right? Like in a positive way, you also become an ambassador of your company, if that's something you want to do.
Yeah, and I think to the person that put that on there, I think that boundary component is there. I think, if you're not ready to voice those opinions, you like the organization, I think you need to find mentors within that organization, those sponsors that you can have those real conversations with. If that's not available, then it's not the right place. And while maybe you can't leave today, you need to start determining the path that will allow you to leave in the future. And that's really important. And it goes back to, what is your voice? What is your reputation? I love the 4 R's, as everyone knows. I teach a course on that: reputation, relationships, resume, and results. If you've got those 4, or you're missing one of those, what do you need to work on in order to be able to take that next step, whether that's within an organization or outside? Mita, you also host, or are a co-host of, an incredible podcast with Dee Marshall, also a Luminary member who Mita introduced us to all those years ago, called Brown Table Talk. You're in your 2nd season. It was just recognized by Essence.
Oh, yes.
One of the top podcasts to listen to. Can you talk a little bit in the minute or 2 that we have left, just around the podcast, why it was started with, and Dee is an amazing voice too to follow. And what do you cover in that podcast?
Yeah, Dee and I started Brown Table Talk because after years of knowing each other and text messages and late night calls, we were sharing all the things that we were experiencing in our workplaces. And we thought this should be a podcast, which is really where it happened. And honestly, we thought about this 2 years ago at Luminary. I brought Dee to Luminary. Number of us was sitting around a table, and I think it was our friend Carol Watson who said, you all should start a podcast. And we actually thought of the name Brown Table Talk. It took us 2 years in the pandemic to launch it. But it is about how to help women of color not just survive, but thrive in their organizations. We also want allies to pull up. We leave tips at the end. We just did season 1. Feel free to binge watch it. And season 2 launches February 23rd with 10 episodes, which you will not be disappointed on the topic.
And see, as an ally, right? That is something where I can learn every time I listen. And even knowing both Dee and you, Mita, personally, right? I learn so much from you. You're a mentor, but every time I listen, I learn more. And those tips are invaluable, because it's not just a conversation. It's like, yes, there's a conversation, and then there are those tips that you can put into action literally the next hour.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, and this is, more to come from Mita, I will recommend you follow her on LinkedIn if you're not following her. Download and subscribe to Brown Table Talk. Anything that you want to make sure the listeners and viewers of this, kind of especially women and women of color, as we're now entering into the 3rd year of this incredible, remarkable time of a pandemic?
Find community. Find community. And I will tell you, Luminary has been an amazing community for me. I just shared, if you check out my post from yesterday, people often ask me, like, how do I expand my network? How do I build community? Join Luminary, right? It's a global digital platform. And I've met so many amazing women through that. And so I think whether it's for just, career search, career advice, but also just support, we all need that. So that's my advice, is find community.
Oh, well, I didn't pay her, everyone, to say that.
No, it's true. Find community. It's important.
Yeah. And wherever that community is, right? Absolutely. So, and and you can have, by the way, you can be a part of multiple communities.
I have many different communities.
Exactly.
Right. So, yes.
Well, now that we're all vaxxed and boosted, Mita, hopefully we will be able to get to see each other in person soon. We're so excited just to see what you're doing and what you're doing next. And for those people, I already mentioned it, but I'll have you mention it. Where can they find you on multiple levels? Because you also write, so maybe also share where they can find some of your articles.
So they can find me on LinkedIn. I've been contributing to Entrepreneur, Harvard Business Review, and Fast Company. And I'm on Instagram because Kate told me to do that 2 years ago. So that's what good friends tell you to do. Get an Instagram account. So I did that too. So there you go.
Well, everyone, like you said, follow Mita. If you're not, Google her and you will see all these incredible articles that she's writing. And I should have mentioned Harvard Business Review earlier. That was a miss, but we got it in. Mita, so good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for the workforce in general, in particular, women and women of color, and using your voice and helping others find their voices. So we'll hopefully see you soon. And everyone, we will be back next week with 2 incredible guests. Oh, actually, no, we will not. I am sorry. I am on vacation, my first vacation since 2019. So stay tuned the week of February 14th for Goaldigger, and we'll be back with Tanya Couture, the founder of West by East, and Julie Schechter, the co-founder of Small Packages. But Mita, it's so great to have you. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.
Bye, friend. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.